I am joined by some of the Interface family for this session, and I want to introduce my friend Mark Borst, who heads up our customer experience team. And Mark joined us shortly before the world changed, and has been drinking from the fire hose since, and has done an amazing job at pulling together virtual experiences for customers like you. And what he's going to do today, along with his team and Chip DeGrace, who he'll introduce in a minute, is just sort of walk you through what we have been producing in terms of those experiences, and in particular how this has affected our Basecamp, which is our headquarters in Atlanta, and how we're talking about that, and in practice how we are planning for an intervention of our own space that I'm sure is similar to conversations you're having with many of your clients. So, oh, and one thing, we got too excited at the very beginning this morning, and I forgot to introduce myself. So my name is Lauren Clark. I am on the strategy team in the marketing department at Interface, and my responsibilities include the A&D channel and engaging with you all in ways that we can come together in community events like this and learn from one another and further design. I'm also a champion for insights that we bring internally in terms of product development and how we go to market. So this is my favorite part of my job. I think I said that last year, is engaging with you guys. And it's good to see some familiar faces and really good to see some new ones as well. So enough about me, and over to you, Mark. Sit back and relax, and we'll have time for some questions following the presentation.
Thank you, Lauren. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here with you today. I am, I guess, on this call, the newest Interface employee, and I'm really happy to be here. The word pivot has taken on all kinds of new meaning for me since arriving in February. I think I probably worked at Basecamp headquarters, which we're going to share with you today, for maybe 5 weeks before we sent everybody home because of COVID. So it's been a really interesting several months. I do want to introduce my team in just a minute, but here's a bit about myself. I've been working with the A&D community in the contract furniture business for, I'm just going to say, several decades. The thing that I love about it the most is how space impacts behavior. That's always been what really jazzes me. And I've worked for a variety of manufacturers, a couple of dealers, as a workplace consultant, working with designers to help them, as I used to say, help your clients to see better, whatever that meant, in terms of furniture application, new ways of working, all those kinds of things. And about 8 years ago, I made a pivot at the invitation of my company at the time to start thinking about focusing on client experience as my main focus. And at first I was hesitant, but then I realized that I'd spent so much time really with being concerned and preoccupied with the impact of space on behavior, that it wasn't that big of a jump to actually start designing the behavior. So I became a practitioner of customer experience, or an experience designer, if you will, and migrated over to Interface in that capacity back in February. My title is Manager of Customer Experience Strategy, and that's new. Before, all of our customer experience was focused on people like yourself coming to see us. Offering gracious hospitality, coordinating all the details, making sure we had all room blocks for Neocon, all those kinds of things. As you can imagine, that's all gone now. And so my colleagues, Laura Miller, who is on the call with us, and Stephanie Tita are here. I want to introduce both of them because they've been tremendously helpful in this pivot. And as Lauren says, we are doing virtual experiences now, and we're developing new platforms for sharing out our assets, our stories, creating new stories, finding better ways to connect in meaningful ways with our design and end user clients, and new ways to tell stories. So you'll see just a tiny bit of that here. We're going to develop a new tool, which I'll tell you more about after Chip does some presenting. And so that's enough about me. Laura and Stephanie, you want to say anything before we get started? I think we're good to go. Go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, that's okay. I thought.
Go.
Laura I'm manager of events and customer experience, and I'm based in LaGrange, Georgia at the Mill.
Good morning, guys. I'm Stephanie Tita. I am the manager of customer experience based in Atlanta. So I was at Basecamp. I've been with Interface for about a year. So I was only at Basecamp for a handful of months too before we have left. But I was giving tours in person and have been giving other Basecamp tours to other IIDA representatives. So we actually do a lot of IIDA tours, both of Basecamp and of our mill in LaGrange. So hope to be able to see you guys in future events, but we're thrilled to be able to talk to y'all today and have enjoyed the content thus far and getting to know a little bit more about you throughout the day. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Chip, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark Borst. My name is Chip DeGrace. I don't know if I've met you before. I can't see you, which is extremely difficult, and I apologize for that. But I'm an interior designer by background. I am from Chicago. Right now I'm sitting in Michigan, where I'm currently living. I'm an interior designer that practiced in the 80s, and in the late 80s joined Interface for the opportunity to practice design holistically. With a little bit of luck, I've been able to do that, as Mark said, over the past decades. Let me just leave it there. But I've been involved in really everything from product to packaging to communications to built space and branded space and trade shows. Really, everything you could possibly do for one brand. It's been extremely fulfilling and it's been a great ride. So anyway, I was going to speak this morning or this afternoon for a few minutes about our headquarters down in Atlanta. I was part of a team, very talented team that put together the planning and the programming and ultimately the execution of the space. And I just wanted to give Mark maybe a preface so that when he lays on what he and the team are working on, it's got some basis in what we started to do, and hopefully that'll help inform the story.
Right, thanks, Chip. So you can see the title of the slide deck used to be Designing for Distance. So back in May, at just one more of our pivots, as we looked at Basecamp and started to plan for how in the world are we going to take this incredibly creative free address space and make it safe and keep it beautiful for the return to work as we understood it back in May. And of course, that story, as you all know, has changed several times. A big piece of this is floor design. We normally change out the flooring in our 4-story space on a regular basis anyway, because it is a working, living, breathing showroom. But now we had to make some decisions about what that design looked like with regard to designing for distance. We knew from day one that we didn't want a literal walk this way supermarket, walk this way in this aisle, arrows in the carpet kind of a solution. We wanted something more subtle, something more biophilic, something more behavioral, if you will. We wanted changes in texture and color and even flooring types to mitigate behavior and just give you a sense of where you were in relationship to others. That story has morphed several times since May. We're about ready to lay down the new flooring. We're very excited about it. That's a different discussion. We really would love to share it with you. As soon as it's just a bit more baked, the designs are done, the palettes are finished, and we're getting ready to actually do that. So we changed this from designing for distance because that discussion has changed now to designing for resilience. And I think you'll see that our facility is extremely resilient, and that's really the theme of the talk today. Go ahead, Chip.
Is that your cat or mine, Mark?
It's my cat, and he's taking his pet down from upstairs, and he's finished with that now, so we're good.
Because I just closed the door and mine's probably, you can't hear them. Anyway, okay, you want to go? You want to hit the slide there? Okay, so I hear tell that some of you have been to our headquarters down in Atlanta. If you've been there, you don't recognize this image because this was the before image. We started 3 years, maybe 3 years looking for a building. And one thing that we did right, and we're not the best client for ourselves, was to engage all of our coworkers in this exercise. We didn't even know what change management was, quite honestly, but we were smart enough to be transparent and begin to discuss it with everybody. We were moving from disparate locations into into this building, as it turns out. And we did a fairly extensive search and ended up wanting to live right down in Midtown Manhattan, in part because we hadn't been part of the Atlanta community. And, you know, we're a group that loves to talk to people, as you can tell, and no one knew where to find us. We had disparate, you know, addresses, and this way we could have a centralized location. It was in a great neighborhood in the Arts District, and it was near a lot of the A&D firms down there in Atlanta. And one of the reasons we picked it. The other reason was, although right now no one can take public transportation or don't want to, we're right across from a MARTA station. And so that anchored our decision as well. We ultimately were looking for an existing building. We, as you know, we've been on a path to zero for some time. We actually achieved that goal a couple of years early. 2020 was that year. But during this exercise, the company in total understood that that wasn't, that we were going to get there, and that wasn't necessarily good enough in today's climate. And so being restorative, that is doing more than being less bad, became our mission, and getting after the climate. So in looking for a building, we ended up looking for an existing building because something called embodied carbon. I'm not sure if you're hip to that word or not, but I'm sure some of us will be explaining that in the near future if you don't know. You know, what carbon is in the stuff that buildings are made of, you know, the structure and then all the interior fit out. Preserving a building is a big part of a brand new project. And so we picked an existing building, and we also picked an existing ugly building. That was a byproduct. Again, location and again, finding something that more or less fit the square footage. The square footage was actually a little bit light. That is to say, it was too small for us. And because we were building confidence in our folks, we engaged in some investigation about what they were really doing day to day. We had an app, and we pinged them occasionally and said, "Hey, where are you?" And you know, they told us they needed, you know, private offices and high panels and big conference rooms and all this stuff. And what we found out was that they were pretty nomadic, and they were in rooms with 2 or 3 people, and they weren't in there very long. And so we began the programming of the building based on what they were doing, not on what they were saying. All right, Mark, want to go to the next one? So anyway, here's the location. You know, we wanted to also be again in the urban center. We've been doing this thing around the globe where, as a business, we pattern ourselves after nature, which sounds like, you know, high-minded, you know, philosophy, but we ingrain all of our business practice and design practice in, you know, what nature would do. And so building a building, or at least refitting a building in the middle of a city urban center is difficult to mimic nature. If you're sitting on a plot of land with trees and such around, it seems a much easier feat. But I think in all projects that we all practice, you know, we're never given what we ultimately want. We're given constraint, and that's what it's about. So right here in the city center, we struck the program to mimic nature. So next one, Mark. And we do this thing around the globe, and you wouldn't necessarily know it, but we tried to create a program, create measurement of success based on what that site would have been before civilization. So on our particular site, the ecosystem that was there was a Piedmont oak, hickory, pine forest. And so there is a way, believe it or not, to convert sort of natural ecosystem services into metrics that then we can measure ourselves against. And we do this with brand new buildings and factories. We also do it with offices. And again, it's an aspirational goal. Obviously, being in the middle of the city, we were never going to be able to harvest solar. We have these big, ugly condo towers around us. And so we focused on carbon and water and atmosphere as the things that we could actually achieve. And we gave ourselves nature as the benchmark, which again is super hard. But you know, why would you aspire to mimic, you know, another building or another office down the street? Why not aspire to one of the best models out there? Okay, Mark. So the best thing we did was tear that facade off, and we saved everything that 97% of what we took out of that building we reused, or repurposed, I should say. So from the very get-go, the aspirational goal of mimicking nature, which you'd be embarrassed to actually tell that to a GC. We were not embarrassed to tell it to the project team, and I think they responded in kind. I think everybody that was on that site understood that we had goals that were not typical, and they were creative in how they solved them. So again, everything that came out of that building hopefully went to some. There are some sources actually in Atlanta, a great network for repurposing of doors and other usable things, and then we recycled obviously steel and so forth. Okay, Mark. So this is probably not a bad model for an office. There's you can't even smell the air, but I can tell you that it's good. The air exchange is good. The lighting is quite nice. There are some options of where to sit and how to participate. And I think the program that we drove was really that we wanted the systems to be flexible. We wanted the systems to mimic nature and be iterative. We wanted them to be something that was in the background, that people didn't necessarily feel air blowing on them, or they didn't necessarily know that they were being affected by the infrastructure, but it was in the background, and it was very supportive. And in terms of the way we planned it, we wanted it to be iterative and flexible, the same way that this environment is. And so it was all about choice. So we planned, I don't know, there's probably 10 different typologies in there, from small focus rooms to single pods for a single person to 3-person, conference rooms or conferencing rooms. And so we offered a full range of typologies so that people could come, visit, participate, collaborate, or do heads down work. And we did it such that the people that there was only about 120 people that were counted at the outset. We had plenty of spots for everybody, and we had plenty of options for everybody, including a great roof deck with a green roof and opportunities to get outside. So again, the basis for the planning and the basis for the infrastructure was our desire to be more like nature. It had nothing to do with COVID. We didn't know COVID was coming. We had no idea necessarily where Interface would be going as an organization, whether we would get bigger or smaller. But nature is one of the most iterative systems there is. It grows and changes organically, no pun intended. And that's what we were trying to build into this very ugly concrete building. All right, Mark. Again, as I said, we focused on water and carbon, so we took all the water off the roof. And we didn't do it via a stream that ran through the slabs like this looks like. It actually is invisible. It runs through risers in the building. But at the bottom, as you can see down there, all the water runs off the roof and runs into a cistern, and we purify that and filter it, and then reuse that water in the building. Atlanta's got a stressed water system like many cities, and we felt like that was important. Further, our people really understand how water affects them. We have a fairly sophisticated system of water for them to fill up their own water bottles and so forth. So water as a thing is very visible and a part of an understandable element in the building. Carbon, again, as I said, we were very focused on not only what went in the building from an embodied carbon perspective, but also the operational carbon. So super efficient systems, not only mimicking nature, but super efficient systems in terms of how much energy they use. And then super modular, super mobile, again, to be iterative. And, we use lead and well to be a structure and on how to design and go forward. And there's certainly a biophilic strategy with how we looked at finishes, how we looked at, again, planning principles for refuge and prospect. And then we even wrapped the building in something that was a little hard to miss. Yeah, so this was the sketch, Perkins and Will's sketch. As you can see, the forest that we were actually mimicking from a model perspective, we actually took a photograph of that and then converted it to pretty sophisticated recyclable polyester graphic on the outside of the building. So for the entire city of Atlanta, it was hard to miss where Interface was, for sure. Additionally, not only was it cool from the outside, and definitely put our sustainability focus out there for the world to see, but the city sees us through that filter, and for the folks inside, they look at the city and their work through the filter of nature. All right, Mark. Yeah, so that's what it ended up looking like, very romantically at dusk. And it changes throughout the day, again, as nature does. So, as dusk hits, you begin to see, more of what's going on inside. And during the day, it's more about the outside. I'm just going to brag here for a second, Mark. We were written up in the New York Times, I don't know, like 4 weeks ago, there was an article about like iconic signage in the United States. And it had like the Vegas Strip, and it had the Drake Hotel in Chicago, and it had Times Square and Radio City Music Hall. And we were in that list. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was around, the sign and the building. Again, we didn't do it to get noticed that way, but what an unbelievable validation. So anyway, little brag in there. All right, Mark. And then as you get inside the building, the systems themselves, as you will, you take what you get. So the structure is weird and it's concrete, and so we use the structure, the waffling of the building, and we planned the lighting and the HVAC systems to mimic that or to work with that. Not necessarily with the furniture below, allowing for a high degree of flexibility. The lighting and the HVAC are super flexible. They're super efficient. The HVAC specifically is something called a chilled beam system. It is not like the typical forced air system where you have high velocity air being pumped around the building. And we did it with a system with hot and cold water that has ambient low volume air that sort of flows over these coils. And so not only is it efficient, but it also is particularly relevant in these times when you don't want air pumping all over the building. And in a pandemic as we have, as it turns out, it's airborne. And I think what a lot of people are probably going to be asking their landlords, or already have, is for what is the air exchange? What is the filtration? These are all questions that are going to be asked of base building. And as it just so happens, we didn't plan it for this. I mean, we planned it for other reasons, but this HVAC system is extremely appropriate for keeping people safe and keeping them away from a virus such as COVID. All right, Mark. We have the obligatory stair. The seating pads are carpet for those of you that have been there. Again, the things that we focused on in this building, mimicking nature and trying to provide great space and flexible space for our people, like air, light, water, are all of the check boxes for how to make a building flexible and how to make it resilient for things like what Mark's going to talk about, how we move forward in a very uncertain time. And as we look at the next slide, you'll see that again, there's plenty of options for engagement and for working. The systems are such that they are appropriate, but somewhat invisible in terms of their impact. But they have allowed Mark and the team that's working on dealing with getting back to work a great, flexible and efficient structure from which to work. And again, it was all about choice and all about trying to get people to understand that they could feel safe, be in a space where, in a specific typology where it was appropriate for what they were doing. So the roof deck, which this looks out onto, gives people outdoor space. We don't have operable windows. We do have outdoor space on the roof and a small balcony on the first floor. Again, to give people the ability to get outside if they need, fresh air. So that was built in. This shows you a piece of the green roof and part of the roof deck. And again, we lucked out. It seems that if you make decisions based on a holistic view, that life seems to go your way. We picked the location based on proximity to public transportation, and of course, on top of the public transportation is ostensibly a 2-block forest. So we ended up with a bonus, which is this great view and proximity to the biophilic inspiration as we look out our windows through that beautiful graphic film. And then I think this is my last slide. This is the opposite of that. This doesn't look inspirational at all, but this is actually the cistern that sits downstairs in the lower level of the parking deck. We've decorated the outside. I think for those of you who have been there, you probably saw it, but it basically talks about water harvesting and the importance of that, and the importance of water, and understanding that water is something we should value and use appropriately. And this is the mechanism and the cistern that was that we stuck down in the basement or in the lower level. I'll leave you with that. I just think that the original intent for the building was to build flexibility, to mimic nature, to allow the systems to respond to whatever happened with the organization. What we didn't expect is what's currently going on in the world. But as Mark and the team that are on sort of the back to work strategy have found out, we're actually in a good spot, that because we have designed it that way, that the remediations, or not even remediations, but the designs, the positive, optimistic designs going forward are things that the building actually is welcoming. And I think I'm going to leave it with there, Mark.
Thank you, Chip, and feel free to weigh in on this. This is a heat map that was produced. Heat map's not the exact right word for it, but it was produced in conjunction with some work we did with the Interior Design magazine. Yep. Behind this image right here is a wonderful tour of the space with the editor and Chip. So feel free to go digging around for that. It's a lot of fun. But we also enjoy this floor plan, and I want to show it to you just because there's lots of before applications here that I just want to quickly bring to your attention, and we might just take a look at a couple of the orientations. So this is the first floor. Chip talked about the work cafe. Here's that reception area we were looking at earlier. The grand staircase is just below here, our stadium stairs with the seating, which, by the way, is where we used to hold town hall meetings. But just to give you a quick idea of the visual here, we can just take a look at this space. Here's our work cafe again. This space is going to change. As you look in this space right here, we're going to change it up. So if you can kind of freeze that area in your mind, I'll tell you in just a little bit what we're going to do to make it a little more enticing for folks to come back. But you get a little sense there of our relationship to the street, combination of postures, hard and soft furnishings, etc. And then let's just take another quick look up the steps. Here's our front entrance. This was a sales area, a sales display area. It's since been moved. We now have a raw concrete floor toward the back of the space where our sales reps are much more happily throwing samples on the ground, a neutral background, and it's a much better place for designers to engage around carpet samples and that sort of thing. Here's what it did look like. But we are repurposing this space as well. A lot of the spaces that we'll be seeing were underutilized. We'd start doing utilization surveys just before things shut down in March. And so we have some data on areas that were not being used very much. And this just happens to be one of them. I'll take you up just a moment to the second floor.
Mark, I mentioned,
go ahead.
I mentioned the sort of the robust discussions we had getting this project done, and those conversations are continuing, with you guys as we begin to again adjust the building, not only for COVID, but for what needs to be done as the building grows and changes.
Exactly. Just notice that we do have a lot of benching applications. With the open workstations the idea was 100% work choice, so no assigned workstations. More on that later. But here's a quick view of the stairs going up from the second floor to the third floor. The stairs are located at different positions throughout the facility, so they pull you through the space and encourage you to enjoy the space as you ascend to the upper level. But this central area, again, is a lot of soft seating arranged in ways for folks to meet together informally, sit down with your laptop for a while and work in a lounge posture. You can see all the transparent spaces around, lots of natural light. That was all part of our well and LEED certification. So just to give you a little sense of how all of that feels.
Mark, is it fair to say that one of the bummers when we moved in was that there were a fair number of people who wanted permanent workstations?
Yes, there is. And I'm going to give you stats on that in just a minute. I want to call your attention to this space right here. It doesn't show, there's a large oak library table, stand-up height library table right here, right off the elevator bank. And that's an area that we've reclaimed. I'm going to show you what we did with it. This area, if you saw it on Chip's tiered program that showed the water descending, is the library area. This is a library table, highly utilized right here. So we'll show you what we're going to do to enhance this space here. And then let's take a quick trip up to the 3rd floor, and then we'll start talking about what we're going to do to change. So again, I think I've already shown you, seems like we just looked at this, didn't we, Chip?
Yeah.
So anyway, you get the idea. This is a fixed boardroom, which is to this day a headache. It's the only area where we really have, Chip talked earlier about modularity. One of our great strengths in terms of being COVID ready, and I know that you struggle with your own customers around this issue, is that all of our furniture, except for this, is non-modular. And so it can be easily moved around. We don't have traditional cubes, panel systems, anything like that. And so that's part of our resiliency in terms of being able to accommodate change rather quickly. It's also our greatest weakness in terms of being prepared to deal with COVID, because everything, as you can see, is wide open. Uh-oh, what happened? Let's go back. All right. We're going to start right here. Can everybody see? Chip, can we see the screen?
You can, yes.
All right. Sorry about that. So I wanted to go back real quickly and just remind everybody of some of the quick sound bites around the original programming for the building. You see Chip's name up there. He was absolutely integral in the planning of the space, the ideation, the iteration, all those good things. And then Joe Connell is the design principal from Perkins and Will, Chicago. Just a few quick sound bites. Our headquarters building needs to tell a good story. And then Joe says building as a story, not as an icon. Again, Chip, who we are and how we engage, it needs to tell that story. Space shapes behavior, design within constraints, and my absolute favorite expression from Chip, and I've still been able to figure out where I first heard it, but design is optimistic, right? One of our tenets, one of our values as a company is design a better way. And I think that's built into all of this. And all of you who are designers, I know must have some sense of this as well. The building was too small going in, so think about that in terms of implications for returning to work in the COVID era. Our idea was to decouple and untether people from their desks so that space is not owned. And then we wanted to use all of it. Every square foot is customer ready. Think about that in the context of COVID. And then finally, I love this expression, a good workplace is never done. So looking at Basecamp before COVID-19, 40,000 square feet, of course, it's still that size, but that's to just indicate how small it is. So at this particular point with 152 employees, that's about 260 square feet per employee, including circulation and meeting space. One of the things that happened in the middle of all this is we decided to take in 30 additional IT people from a remote location, on top of everything else we're trying to do to prepare for the return to the office. But in 2019, we had 250 customer events, 200 tours of the space. We had 152 employees at that time, and on an average weekday, 108 of them were at work, or at the office rather. And then we had 76 double monitor workstations, which were supposed to be free address. And this speaks to Chip's earlier question. At this point in 2019, 64 of them were assigned, which wasn't part of the original charter. It just sort of moved in that direction without much resistance. And so we've had to sort of pull it back from that in order to really be able to say, okay, X number of employees, you can return to work on any given day, and here's how we're preparing for it. So there's change management. There was change management getting us to this point, and now there's change management getting us to this next point of making it safe to return to work.
Hey, Mark?
Yes.
One point, working with, our sizable customers, our global customers, you know, the fact is everybody's moving away from assigned workstations, assigned offices even in a lot of cases, to give their organization flexibility. So it's what needs to happen based on the COVID pressure, that to make real estate, you know, uber flexible. The assigned workstation is not part of the program.
Right. No, that's a really good point, Chip. Thank you. So back in June, we did an internal survey for quantitative feedback of all our employees. At this point, this was actually in May, I think, the office was still not open officially. And some of the responses are summed up here in these bullet points. So 45% of our respondents, and I think we had like a 70% return, something like that, our response rate, were still hesitant to come in as of June of 2020. 30% said that they might return for 3 days a week around the first month of next year. 56% said they would return for possibly 3 days a week around June of next year, so a year out from the actual survey. 43% said 1 to 2 days maybe over the next year, and 51% said 3 to 4 days over the next year. So it's a fairly conservative response. Meanwhile, by the way, we had sent out a new telecommuting policy, which was almost completely baked, but not quite. And COVID moved that forward in a big way. And so we had a new, I'd have to say, a bit more liberal telecommuting policy in place right around the same time that this was done. So what are some of the key takeaways from that quantitative survey? Employees are hesitant to come back because of spikes, and we certainly know now a lot more about spikes than we did even then. They might have had an at-risk family member, a child with asthma, an older person living in the home, or had childcare issues. And of course, at this point, we all thought we'd still be returning our kids to school this calendar year. They wanted us to make sure that we helped employees feel more comfortable. The whole psychological and physical safety thing was a big piece of all the work that we were doing about getting people to come back to the office, or at least encouraging them to. Employees wanted to be made aware of changes being made. We have had a lot of virtual town hall meetings around all this, and there's been a big change management piece to that as well. People were feeling very productive at home. I'm sure this aligns really well with what you're hearing from your clients. And telecommuting was working just fine for most everybody. And then the last piece, everyone really missed their colleagues, and they missed Basecamp. They missed the building. We'd lived there for somewhere between 12 and 18 months when this happened. And I think there was a sense of grief, a sense of loss about, are we going to be able to return? Will it ever be the same? Will it work like it did? Because people were really loving the way it worked. This is where there's also some design tension, because bringing people back to collaborate is a little more difficult than bringing them back to focus. So we are going to work with, I'll tell you a bit more about this. We'll have a desk reservation system by the time this is all done. So people will have a safe place to come back, reserve a place to come and work for the day, but that still is not the main reason they want to come back. The main reason they want to come back is to be with people. Then we partnered with Steelcase and did a qualitative feedback study. This was a little deeper dive. It was only with about 21 members of our employees and associates, and did a deeper dive and discovery exercise around envisioning the successful post-COVID workplace. Began with a discussion, that discussion was around design issues, around work issues, design considerations, right? So it was about a broad range of topics, offering insight into opportunities to navigate this crisis now, near, and far. I think that's a really important piece of this, because all of our customers, and I'm sure all of yours, are dealing with how long is temporary? What does the future look like? It's very open-ended right now. We knew we'd be returning to work in waves, and we needed to increase the resilience of the workplace. There were actually 16 categories that these 21 people chose from in terms of what our top priorities would be. You can see the ones that were chosen here from the 16: trust, human safety, environmental stewardship, fostering community, and organizational health. The key takeaways from this deeper dive is that we really knew we had to reactivate Basecamp. We wanted to be comfortable having customers in again, wanted to have Basecamp as a resource for customers and employees, We knew we needed to establish, this is the feedback, a clear set of guidelines that everyone can understand and abide by, that we had to make it a safe space for employees who might have differing opinions about the safety of returning, providing a balance between work from home and working from Basecamp, and then finally, collaboration is still important, as I said. Creating collaborative settings to offer comfort and safety for employees is important for connectivity to each other and to the organization. So those became the top priorities based on this deeper dive. And then we also worked with Perkins and Will around, well, we did a lot of work around capacity and density studies. So here's some output from a block and stack that they did for us. I hope you can see it. I know the numbers are really quite small. I took this off of a PDF, which makes it kind of hard to see. But we actually looked at 4 different scenarios: 10% occupancy, 20% occupancy, 60%, and 80%. And the pies are here just to show you what happens. So the red pie, piece of the pie, let's just look at the 20%. Number of occupiable desks with a monitor, those would be the reservable ones going into the future. So 26% for the 20% option. And then 41% collaboration seats available, and then 33% miscellaneous. So this got us started. We actually chose the 20 as the scenario we wanted. I'll show you real quickly what it does to the footprint on the first floor. Here we are at 10%, which is kind of where we were to begin with. So nothing much changes here. That space you see there is where our interior design services department works, where folks do layouts and things for you. 20% capacity. Now we're adding workstations in places we're not so happy about. You can see in the upper northeast corner, we've added some workstations. Looking at 60%, it gets even more dense, and now we're starting to steal some of the huddle spaces. And then 80%, it's workstations in every single corner of the building. So I think this really graphically illustrates the kind of thing we're talking about. And this, again, is space for someone to work in a safe place. The seats are all coded, right? So the red seats are the ones that would be available. And you can see that's there aren't that many of them to safely work. And then we have the same sort of situation in all the meeting rooms. All those gray seats that you see are unavailable. So that gives you a little clue about, so we did a really deep dive around what this might look like. Then fast forwarding, just to want to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing in terms of intervention. Hopefully you can remember some of those things that we were talking about in terms of the actual space. We knew that we wanted to not touch the infrastructure if we could help it. Because again, we didn't know on the front end how long this change would be. We didn't want to make a huge investment in change until we really knew what it is we were actually facing. And so we decided at the outset that we'd look at underutilized areas. We would focus on ways, first of all, to create that reservation system for desks, which I'll talk about just a little bit more in just a minute, but also ways for us to really enhance ways to safely collaborate. And when we say safely collaborate, we mean across a 6-foot distance. So I will say that Joe Connell said early on from P&W that he thought people, and Perkins and Will believed, that people could in fact collaborate effectively across 6 feet. I didn't really believe it at the time, but then we realized that we had to accept that reality, and so we did the best we could to plan for it. This particular drawing is one of the dealer, we worked for the Steelcase dealer to kind of help us with furniture interventions. You can see the 6-foot circles. Perkins and Will actually did 12-foot circles, so you could really see the 6-foot circumference around an individual or a place, which really sort of shrank the space. It was quite amazing the effect that had on how you perceived how much space there really was per person. And just because we have these little 6-foot circles here doesn't mean that every one of those seats should be occupied at any given time. So the space you see here in the southeast corner where the big round table is, we're actually bringing, it's an 8-foot table. We're bringing down from a 3rd floor executive conference room that we're repurposing. So we're creating in this corner kind of a dining corner, kind of a gathering space for people to break bread. There aren't that many places to do it across one surface now in the Work Cafe because we have lots of 30-inch tables. So we thought this would offer an opportunity for at least 2, maybe 3 people, possibly even 4 eventually, to break bread together in one place. And we could do it right on the corner overlooking the street, kind of a place to see and be seen, kind of a fun place to hang out. And we took the lounge furniture that was in that corner and moved it over to the left to a very underutilized area, which was a cafe height table. It was like a waterfall edge island with power. that nobody ever used, reservable space. And so now we're creating a soft seating area, a different posture, a lounge posture that is still reservable. And there's still, so it's like a living room facing the screen on the wall. So there is potential for interactivity. We've introduced some somewhat controversial hanging felt sliding screens. We really wanted to kind of keep the biophilic theme going as best we could. And so we're looking at different patterns. We can do customs. This is just one rendering. You'll see different versions of it as we quickly walk through the space. And then of course we added in plants as well as part of ways to sort of define and divide space in a natural biophilic way.
Mark, the first floor is customer ready space, right? It's
Yes.
got, you know,
Yeah.
it's the cafe, the access to designers and so forth. Nothing that's going on here stops that from happening. Is that right? And
That's exactly right. So we're focusing on this still being a customer space, and where we used to tour customers through the entire building every time they came, we're now trying to keep them, at least for the time being, on the first floor. And so we're doing the best we can to ramp up what that customer engagement might look like if we just were able to do the first floor. These workstations you saw before in that 20% footprint we looked at. This is the one area, everyone, where we're actually taking workstations out and reorienting them. So if you look at the drawing on the left, the rendering, we've added, so we have absolutely no panels anywhere in our space. Because we reoriented and because we've exploded these workstations a bit so they can be further apart from one another, we've exposed a little bit of infrastructure. It happens to be Steelcase Seascape that we have here with height adjustable desks. So we brought in some panels on legs to try to keep the scale light. That was the goal throughout the facility to begin with. Some frosted glass for a little bit of privacy for the folks that are facing circulation. Our original idea here was that every single one of these stations is occupiable. We've since kind of moved away from that just a bit. Perkins and Will did not agree with the proximity of some of these, like these right here. But we also provided a way here for folks to work together in a way they couldn't before because it was benching. So there's a balance here. All of the other spaces where there are workstations are going to stay the same. We will have a desk reservation system that will light up as green for available and red for not available. And it'll be a system that you reserve the desk before you come in. During the day, we're trying to organize a bit around neighborhoods, but not exclusively. And so that was the conclusion we came to after our original idea that we were going to remove all furniture that could not be used. That became an untenable plan, and it really didn't work.
Mark, just to give the room a sense of who you're designing for here, is this still the application designers, the concept designers that inhabited the space?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I did not explain that well.
And part of the reason for low panel is it's sort of the spirit of the space, but additionally the work that they are working on is kind of cool to look at. I mean, it's visual and reflects kind of how the system works, how our flooring system works. So it's actually a pretty cool corner to hang out in. And
it's actually turning into a bit of a maker's studio, because in one corner that's not pictured here is what we're calling now the design lab, which is where that raw flooring is now, where designers can come in and develop palettes on a really neutral background. And that's right adjacent to this space. It's also where the floor people work, FLOR people work, and do a lot of their design work and storyboards and creative work. And so it's got a really nice vibe to it. And we wanted to maintain it as best we could in a customer facing space. We're actually taking over. So some of our little huddle rooms will be reservable for part of the day. We don't want these reservable all day because we know they're going to turn into private offices immediately. And we don't want that to happen, but we're trying to bring in just a little bit of a residential vibe here. We chose this desk because it has some nice wood features to it. We're going to put that, I think it's a blue dot lamp in there as well, to kind of just domesticate the space just a bit and create some warmth. This is a major passageway between our sample library and the Maker Studio space. And so these are little storefronts we want to maintain kind of a really nice look for. So in the rest of these huddle rooms and the other floors, we're using leftover desks to create this same space. So we're gonna turn about half of them into these little reservable ergonomic workspaces. And then I talked about the elevator bank earlier on the second floor, I think it was, where the big library table was. We're bringing in this Bolio furniture, which has this nice kind of Scandinavian loungy feeling to it. but we're making sure that whatever we do, where we bring in more lounge furniture, we provide support, as much ergonomic support for computer work as possible, because most of our spaces that were underutilized because folks would get uncomfortable after an hour of working without the right back support and that sort of thing. And so we were really trying to focus on that, but also keep a really warm, kind of residential, free-form kind of vibe. I'll show you the space behind that. You can see the library table in the upper right-hand corner of the footprint. That's one of the most popular places for folks to hang out, and we still have the capability there for 4 people to use the space at once. We took some of these Haworth stations that we call the teacup stations, little freestanding stations, that S formation in the middle just to mitigate the space a little bit. And then we took those Brodies that you see on the left, which are right now sort of distributed throughout the Basecamp building, and put them in a circle and removed the panels on them. So now you can actually sit in an ergonomically supported lounge position with your laptop and meet safely with 3 other people. This met with a little bit of controversy in some of the stakeholder review groups that we did. We're going to keep those panels just in case we want to add them back on, but we're going to experiment with this as a way to comfortably collaborate in a lounge setting. And then on the 3rd floor, that same condition right off the elevator lobby, we're doing something similar. By the way, the wood shelves in the background is built-in millwork and is not movable. So we have the chairs on the left, not rendered very well in this drawing. They actually are really, really cool, that are very high back. So creating kind of a room within a room. We expect folks will want to kind of hang out here. It's a cool place to meet and just have an ad hoc serendipitous encounter with a colleague. And then a little bit of sound mitigation there on the right. So that is a felt panel construction to absorb sound, but also divide off space just a little bit, domesticating it again with a lamp. If you look through the bookshelves, you can see another lamp kind of in the background that kind of mirrors it. That's going to be on a tabletop. But again, creating a small scale kind of lounge setting that's comfortable enough for a short sit or a little bit of a longer sit if you want to meet with folks in kind of a lounge setting. And then looking at that interior space, upper left, I told you we'd be looking at those felt screens again. There's another iteration of them. Again, a bit controversial because we don't want to divide space. We're very concerned about any kind of vertical division. But we thought this would really help kind of ante up in terms of how folks might use the space. And so we've created this little TV lounge, as you see on the lower left-hand side. And then on the upper part, you might recognize that as the Steelcase Coalesce SW1 table. It's not drawn correctly in scale because the right symbols weren't available, but that is a lounge height table. Those little white things pull out toward the user with no visible tracks or anything to put your laptop on. So now we're taking existing lounge furniture, a couple of cushions to bolster your back, and you can pull the laptop up close to you, and it's a comfortable place to work with as many as 2 or 3 people and be safely distanced. And now the last thing I want to share with you, and we really would love to get your feedback and any questions you may have. This is the 3rd floor executive conference room. So right off to the right is where our executives sit in open plan. This space was highly underutilized. You can see 3 different zones. There's this large table in the middle. There's a small lounge space over here, and this is a stand-up height table that's while movable, it's fairly permanent. It's a very, very heavy waterfall edge stand-up height table. And we got permission from the leadership team to use this space as one more way to bring people back, entice them back to the space. We needed a space that held more than 4 people. Right now, our largest conference room only holds 4 people if we're distancing at 6 feet, with the exception of our training rooms up on the 4th floor. So we're now using this space. We actually took Steelcase research, informative, generative, and evaluative research around different ways of meeting and plugged those in for different layouts to help people understand, stakeholders understand how we might use this space. So here's an informative setting, kind of a traditional classroom setup. Here's seen in 3D. So supporting collaboration in small group training, sharing digital content, and running workshops. I don't have a larger image of it here, and I'm sorry, I should have included it. This is Steelcase Flex furniture, which you may know is designed for highly flexible spaces. These are for agile environments, for agile teams. The idea is it's entirely hackable. That strange little chicken foot design on that table you see in the foreground, is that way because of evidence-based design. It supports this multiple functions of this table. There are casters integrated into those diagonal legs, and there's a glide integrated into that post. And so it can be both a fixed and mobile table, and it's also height adjustable. Hard to tell from this picture, but the tables in the back are stadium height, they're stand-up heights. If we wanted to, we can bring the row in the front up to stand-up height as well. So there's a lot of flexibility for different kinds of postures all within the same space. Here's another arrangement. This is both informative and generative in terms of the kinds of collaboration it supports. So we have little clusters of 3 tables, little aside areas for a couple of folks to work on smaller projects, maybe in the middle of a workshop, that sort of thing. It's an odd shaped room, so that little lounge peninsula, we've done a lot of reviews with functional leaders around how they might use this. And there's a lot of agitation right now just to lose the lounge furniture in there. So we'll see where we end up with that. Here's another layout. Same layout in 3D. Layout 3. So now we're talking about that creating a large conference table out of 4, where we might actually take carpet designs and lay them out. A lot of extra floor space available if there's a design iteration session. This is an evaluative setup, right, where folks are bringing in things and comparing notes. You can see the 6-foot circles around the users, which gives you some sense. We probably would list this as an 8-person room.
Mark, I'd like to hear that people are agitated over the furniture. I mean, we like.
Well, it's probably my fault.
I'm
always fan on the flame.
I like to hear people are emotionally invested in what's going on, and if they're agitated, obviously they've got something to say. That's good stuff, man.
Well, everybody on the call knows that strong opinions come out of nowhere in these discussions. It's really amazing to me. But they're all rooted in applications, right? So we were asking these leaders, how would you use this space? Would it support the way you might how you might work with your team? I'm a workshopper, and so I'm leading the witness on this. I mean, I really can use this room for a lot of different things, but not everyone works that way. So we'll have to have some change management around this. We'll have, if we're successful in doing this, we'll have maps in the room for typical layouts. We'll have a default position for the furniture to be left in when you leave, so there'll be some orderliness to the space. We're trying to think through all those scenarios.
If I could also tell the room that this particular room, of course, was for the executives. So those are glass doors, entry doors, egress doors, and they were full film almost from floor to ceiling, in part because of the confidentiality that would happen in that room. Well, now that it's opened up to the organization, I know Mark and the crew were talking about levels of transparency.
Yep.
It's part of the organizational values to be open and transparent, as you can see standing on that floor plate from some of the images that you can see all the way through the space, ostensibly. Even the closed rooms are glassed, at least on one side. And we've used graphics as a way to sort of partially screen or fully screen. But the team is wrestling with, should these doors be more open so that people, since this is used by everybody, and wherever the execs go or wherever confidentiality is required, does that need to have some graphic treatment consistent with what we've done elsewhere in the building to maybe make it a little bit more private?
Yeah.
So application of fritting or graphic as it relates to not only the activity but also the values of the company.
Absolutely. We want that natural light transmission because it's so important to our sense of well-being and to the building as a whole. And so we are looking at switch glass, very expensive, as you all know, but it's one way to completely darken a room and then bring it back to full transparency again. And then different degrees of film. We're looking at Casper, which is that film that actually obscures pixels on a screen on the wall. So we're just trying to figure out the most transparent solution that provides some digital and acoustical privacy as well. And then here's the 4th layout, and here's layout 6, which is a generative space. So we moved the stand-up height desks to one corner, created a bit of a semicircle using these different perching elements and so forth to create a room for a really creative empathy mapping, one of my favorite things. Small group training, could be journey mapping, planning and strategy meetings, all those kinds of things. And then layout 6, again, similar as you see here. We're going to have lots of modular power, so we're not worried about trenching or adding floor cores or that sort of thing. So folks will always have juice available somewhere in the room, either through Steelcase thread or that new kettlebell thing that maybe some of you have seen that will actually have, folks will be able to check it out at the front desk and bring it up to this room and stay plugged in all day if they want to. Last slide. So why come back to Basecamp? Just real quickly, in-person, face-to-face interaction as it relates to our culture and our brand, you know these things. Number one reason. We have to be able to innovate, and we want to support collaboration however we can. All of us have tremendous Zoom fatigue, and so we're trying to balance that with employee engagement. How do we engage with one another meaningfully and safely in space? And then finally, how do we exhibit all this? We need to walk the talk. We originally thought about a case study. That has an ending. We want this to be an open, organic story. We want to be able to share this out with your customers about how we dealt with all of this. So we're certainly going to document it visually in other ways in social media. So that is the end of the formal presentation. We really appreciate you hanging in there with us. And I will stop sharing now, and we would be delighted to have a period of time where you share thoughts, ideas, questions, whatever you might have.
I'm back. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chip. A general question just to get things rolling, encourage others to jump in, but Basecamp is really a standard for sustainable design, but were there any goals that we weren't able to meet or elements that are still to be incorporated? You know, what were the compromises?
Yeah, I think around energy. You know, we have no solar capability, so there was no way that we could actually harvest solar off the roof, and so we have to buy through the grid, and even those options are not great. So you know, especially in an urban setting, you can only do what you can do. But as I said, you know, you got to set high aspirational goals for yourself, and I think we're having influence, honestly, in the city. That's one thing I didn't mention is, you know, if you're there and you're very public and making demands, things will change. And so even around energy, I think Interface will make a difference there, and hopefully not just for ourselves, but for the entire grid.
In terms of timing for this intervention, Mark, you know, what are we shooting for currently?
That's a really good question. It seems to all of us that are leading the charge on this that it's taking a whole lot longer than we ever thought it would. But part of the reason is the rationale for doing it in the first place has morphed and changed. And so we're hoping to have this largely finished by the end of this year. So we're going to order the furniture soon. We have to settle on finishes, and it's designed by committee, so that'll take just a little longer than it might normally. But that should happen fairly soon. And we have most of our final solutions have been approved by our steering committee. So we're ready to go. And then the flooring, we're going to coordinate the flooring change out. Well, the first 3 floors for sure. We'll coordinate with the furniture placement, furniture installation, and that sort of thing. So it's going to get a little complicated over the next few months, but we're pretty confident we'll have it wrapped up by the end of 2020.
And what are our current recommendations regarding carpeting for Interface customers related to COVID design? So how is this designing for distance conversation evolving? I think I can take this one. So the immediate reaction to COVID was we need literal wayfinding techniques that help people move throughout a space. And I think what we're finding is, yes, we do need that, but in terms of modularity and resiliency and designing for longer term, which was part of the discussion in my breakout earlier today, is why are we designing for temporary when we should have our eye toward the future? And so I think that, you know, our system of products lends itself to this type of wayfinding and direction and spatial awareness before COVID, and will remain to, or, you know, will continue to do that. But I think what we're seeing is that we continue the path. We continue the path of systemic thinking and coming at our products from a sustainability mindset, from a design mindset, and the intersection of those two things, and how, what innovations are born of that.
If I could add something there, Lauren, and that is that we absolutely believe that walking on a certain kind of flooring changes your experience. And so whether it's COVID or whether it's, your normal program where you're trying to create different experiences under different typologies, we believe flooring plays a huge part, not just in the color and the texture, but also how it feels on your feet. That it is one of the bigger surfaces, and it makes a huge difference. So, make people feel comfortable, make them feel healthful in these times. I think flooring plays a big role. We were working with a customer in Vienna, and I don't know if you guys know anything about Viennese design. I'm not an expert, but it's very gray, and it's very there's not a lot of pattern, and there's no red. So we explained kind of what the company's standard was that they were working with, and the woman who was leading it said, "No, I don't think that's going to work. We don't want that much pattern. We don't want, And even though I, in my emotional way, expressed that the system could make people feel a certain way, she said, "No, I don't think the user group, they're not going to respond to that." And then after about an hour of discussion, not about that topic, but about the full program, she came back later and she's in front of everybody. She said, this was on, I never met her. This was on the, on Zoom. She said, "Chip, do you think we're being boring?" And I said, "Well, yes, but I'm not sure that's the question to ask." I said, are you underutilizing this whole surface that you're walking on? I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Even if you have gray, there can be different textures of gray. It can look monolithic, but when you walk on it, you will feel the difference. Your people will feel the difference, and they will understand you're trying to elicit something different." So I don't know, after 3 different meetings, we actually moved them to a point where they're actually using the floor to make people feel a certain way, to move in a certain direction, so on and so forth. So anyway, it's cool. What we aspire to do.
All right. I think, Cheryl, I'm turning it over to you. Is that right?
I think so.
Welcome back.
Sounds good. What an amazing day one. The conversations, kicking it off with All We Can Save and with Catherine, and then the breakout groups. We can't forget the incredible group of young designers and students who've assembled to join us. So a huge thank you to Interface, a huge thank you to attendees and participants. Thank you for your passion and your activism and your camaraderie. A big thank you to Team IIDA for keeping everything moving. And I'd like to invite Erin Gendy to join me.
All right, perfect. Thank you for the invitation.
There you are, Erin.
Right, great. Appreciate that.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you too. And it's really just amazing to see this group of people coming together. And I appreciate the opportunity to close out these sessions too. So thank you for that to everybody who's part of the planning committee. As we're closing out for today, because am I right that this is the end of it?
End of day one.
Yes, end of day one, yes. So as we close out for today, I really want to thank each and every one of you for your time, your participation, your attention, but more than anything, really the open-mindedness and the curiosity that you've all brought to this event. I know we had some really great small group discussion, and I hope everybody found that to be really energizing. So this in-person Converge event last year actually turned out to be really one of the highlights, I would say, for the Interface team. And so obviously with all the circumstances and everything that's been going on, I am really so thankful that we've been able to construct this opportunity to get together virtually, and also to welcome some of you for a second time. So thanks for that. I'd have to say that really one of the big takeaways, especially after participating today myself, is that really seeing all of you join us for this Converge virtually gives me really a sense of optimism. Despite, all of the pressures, distractions, divergence that I think that we're really experiencing right now, the fact that this group and, each one of you is attending here is a really great reminder for me that the desire for community and for connections and to learn cannot be quashed. So I really hope that today's session's delivered for you on those things. And like me, that the content and some of the discussion sparks some ideas, perhaps a little bit of emotion, and that really you have an appetite for more.